Philadelphia Hall, 1776, July.
A reenactment of the Second Continental Congress makes it seem like all the arguments and events that were performed happened on the same day.
In fact, the events and debate we will act out for you did not all happen simultaneously.
The following is a short timeline of what led to the Declaration of Independence. Britain wanted more income for the colonists, so it assigned a series of taxes for the colonists to pay.
The colonists felt they could be taxed only if they had representatives who could speak and vote for them in the English Parliament.
King George III wanted his army to crush the disrespectful Americans. When he hired over 12,000 German Hessian mercenaries to fight his American war, colonists rallied for independence.
In mid-May 1776, a month after the Battle of Lexington Concord, John Adams called the Continental Congress to meet to discuss problems of England.
Richard Henry Lee, a Virginian, made a motion to the Congress on June 7th that these United Colonies are, in of right, ought to be free and independent states.
At first, only 9 colonies favored separation from England. Numerous debates went on about the motion to declare independence.
By June 11th, Congress had appointed a committee of 5 to form a declaration of intention to separate us from England. Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, Robert Livingston, and Roger Sherman.
The Congress recessed from June 11th to July 1st, in which time Thomas Jefferson wrote the first draft of the Declaration. While Jefferson was working on the Declaration, the Battle of Bunker Hill occurred on June 17th. John Adams and Ben Franklin reviewed and revised Jefferson's draft before Congress met again on July 1st.
The legal separation from Great Britain occurred on July 2nd, 1776, when the Second Continental Congress voted to approve the resolution of independence that had been proposed in June by Richard Henry Lee of Virginia.
After voting for independence, Congress turned its attention to reviewing the document written by Jefferson, which explained the decision to England and to the world.
They reviewed the draft of the Declaration, paragraph by paragraph. This is when the lengthy reference to the sins of slavery was removed, so that South Carolina, which had many slaves, would support the cause.
Congress debated and revised the Declaration, finally approving it on July 4th. Only John Hancock, President of the Convention, and Charles Thompson, Secretary of the Convention, signed on July 4th.
On July 19th, Congress ordered that the Declaration of Independence be written on large parchment paper in cursive writing and have a new title, the Unanimous Declaration of the 13 Colonies of America, and that when written, it to be signed by every person in the Congress. On August 2nd, most people in the Congress signed. Several delegates signed at later times because they could not be present on August 2nd. John Dickinson and Robert Livingston never signed. Dickinson refused to sign because he was opposed to it. Livingston did not sign because he was recalled to New York. Those present signed. Then Congress ordered it to be printed as broadsides and distributed to all the colonies. The signers knew that they could be hanged for treason for signing their names, and that about a third of the population of the colonies remained loyal to the king at that time.
Meeting in the city of Philadelphia, announced July 1776. The Honorable John Hancock of Massachusetts Bay, present.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Please call the roll.
Georgia.
Here, Mr. Secretary.
South Carolina.
Here, Mr. Secretary.
North Carolina.
Here, Mr. Secretary.
Delaware.
Here, Mr. Secretary.
Maryland.
Here, Mr. Secretary.
New Jersey.
Here, Mr. Secretary.
New York.
Here, Mr. Secretary.
Pennsylvania.
Here, Mr. Secretary.
New Hampshire.
Here, Mr. Secretary.
Connecticut.
Here, Mr. Secretary.
Massachusetts.
Here, Mr. Secretary.
Rhode Island.
Here, Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Thompson.
Delegates from Virginia. Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Nelson. Thank you, Mr. Thompson. I, John Hancock, President of this Congress, officially open this session. Before we hear any debate, the Chair welcomes the late arrival of the Georgia delegation, George Walton, Button Gwinnett, and Dr. Lyman Hall. Dr. Hall, how do you Georgians stand on independence?
Well, most of Georgia seems to be against it. We delegates seem to be for it.
So I guess we'll listen carefully then decide. We've been given no instructions on how to vote.
Thank you, Dr. Hall. We can't really start this session without our daily weather report from Mr. Jefferson. Mr. Jefferson, if you please.
Sir, the weather speaks for itself. Hot, humid, and about 90 degrees of temperature.
Thank you, Mr. Jefferson. Gentlemen, we will now entertain any motions important to this body.
Mr. President,
The chair recognizes the distinguished delegate from the colony of Virginia, Mr. Thomas Jefferson.
Mr. President, on behalf of the Virginia Legislature and Mr. Richard Henry Lee, I move that these united colonies should and right ought to be free and independent states. And these states do not dissolve all connections with Great Britain, form a planned confederation, and take steps to secure foreign alliances.
It has been moved that these united colonies are free and independent states, and that these states should now dissolve all connections with Great Britain. Do I hear a second?
I second the motion, Mr. President.
It has been moved and seconded that this Congress debate and vote on independence from Britain. We are now ready to debate and vote on this issue. I will now recognize delegates who will speak to this cause.
Mr. President,
The chair recognizes the distinguished delegate from the colony of Massachusetts, Mr. John Adams.
Mr. Hancock and fellow delegates, you know that I am John Adams of Massachusetts. We Americans are at the crossroads. No people at any other time in history have faced a more important decision than we do now. It is a decision for all Americans to support. I have great passion in this cause. Gentlemen, the king has refused to remedy the great and heavy injustices we have suffered, so nobly expressed in Mr. Jefferson's work. George III has refused or rejected our humble petitions and at the same time sent armies and navies to crush us at our attempt at liberation. We colonies should now declare the world the reason for this independence. Such a declaration will bring allies to our struggle and unite us. We have no time to lose. Instead, we shall fight. We shall fight with whatever means we have, with rusty muskets, with broken flints, with bows and arrows if need be. But gentlemen, we shall fight. All I can say is that I stake everything on this cause, sink or swim, live or die, to survive or perish with my new country. This is my resolution.
Mr. President,
The chair recognizes the distinguished delegate from the colony of Massachusetts, Mr. Samuel Adams.
Mr. President and fellow delegates, I am Samuel Adams from the colony of Massachusetts. As you are aware, I haven't spoken much in this Congress. My contribution to this cause has been my actions, not my words. But today I must speak. I have but one cause, the cause of liberty and independence. Independence has been the first wish of my heart. We no longer need His Majesty or His Parliament to dictate our futures. I've long been of the opinion that America herself, under God, must finally work out her own salvation.
Mr. President, the chair recognizes the distinguished delegate from the colony of New Hampshire, Mr. Josiah Bartlett.
Mr. President, fellow delegates, I am Dr. Josiah Bartlett from the independent colony of New Hampshire. For my fellow men with action. Sirs, as you all know, I'm against long-winded speeches. Can't sit through 'em. Anyway, let me say my piece and sit down. Last year, New Hampshire wasn't ready for independence. Kept thinking we needed British protection against the Indians. But Mr. Paine's common sense had a great impact on us. Now, Mr. Whipple, Mr. Thornton, and I just received support for independence from our legislators. May God unite our hearts in all things that tend to the well-being of our rising empire.
Mr. President, the chair recognizes the distinguished delegate from the colony of Rhode Island, Mr. William Ellery.
Mr. Hancock and fellow delegates, I am William Ellery from the mighty colony of Rhode Island, where shipbuilding fames. Sirs, I worry about what will happen when we lose this war. It is one thing to declare ourselves independence. It is another to complete the process by defeating the greatest power on earth. How are we to do this? Are you all ready to hang us traitors against His Majesty?
Mr. President,
The chair recognizes the distinguished delegate from the colony of Connecticut, Mr. Roger Sherman.
Mr. President and fellow delegates, I am Roger Sherman from the thriving colony of Connecticut, where business is strong. I've been a steady, unswerving supporter of independence, but I disapprove of the violence deemed necessary to achieve it. And I believe Parliament has no authority over us, as seen in the Declared Act of 1766,
colony of Pennsylvania, Mr. Benjamin Franklin.
Mr. President, fellow delegates, I am Dr. Benjamin Franklin from the Quaker colony of Pennsylvania, where a governing body currently meets. Sirs, rebellion is to tyrants as obedience is to God. Up to now, I have not said much, but now I must speak. Never have we colonists been so recklessly mishandled by the incompetent officials. With oppressive acts and taxes, worst of all, our character has been stifled. It's clear to me that we Americans are different than we've ever been. It is time for their ties with our mother nation, not later, now.
Mr. President! The chair recognizes the distinguished delegate from the colony of New Jersey, Mr. Richard Stockton.
Mr. President and fellow delegates, I'm Richard Stockton from the colony of New Jersey, where Sirs Brother Witherspoon and the rest of the delegates just arrived here, but not too late to tell you that we've come to support of independence, especially to talking to Mr. John Adams. He truly is an atlas of independence. We've been taxed and feel that king and parliament should not have authority over us.
Mr. President,
The chair recognizes the distinguished delegate from the colony of New York, Mr. Francis Lewis.
Mr. President, fellow delegates, I am Francis Lewis from the commercial colony of New York, where I thrive. I've been a member of Sons of Liberty for many years now. Back in '65, I believe it was. Anyway, I feel now as I did back then. As Dr. Franklin says, Americans are different. We're not exactly Englishmen anymore. I guess we're less refined, more violent, and maybe we sell farms better than anybody. So that's why we need a new nation to call our own. Thank you.
Mr. President,
The chair recognizes the distinguished delegate from the colony of Pennsylvania, Mr. John Dickinson.
Mr. President and fellow members of this Continental Congress, I am John Dickinson from the wealthiest colony of Pennsylvania, the breadbasket of the colonies. Sirs, my heart and my mind tells me to use caution in this matter of independence. So I say, let us wait. Time is yet not ripe for proclaiming independence. I believe that we should keep written thinking that we mean reconciliation. Proclaiming independence at this stage is like burning down our house in winter with a family before we have another to live in. We need to wait until we have settled differences among ourselves and until we are better prepared. Do not be swayed, sirs, by the agitators to take rash acts in the name of patriotism. We need not dissolve this union between America and Britain, when the dream is, to me, is between Massachusetts and the Crown. Massachusetts is the center of mob rule, anarchy, and revolutionary agitation. Why should we go along with it? Independence is a mistake, and we cannot win a war against the greatest power on earth. Lose this war and we'll all be hanged as traitors. Think about that. Mr. President,
The chair recognizes the distinguished delegate from the colony of Delaware, Colonel Thomas McKean.
Mr. President and fellow delegate, I am Colonel Thomas McKean from the colony of Delaware. Sirs, I've done my best to rally the support for the measure of independence in Delaware. My own personal views took place after the Townshend Acts of 1776. If we do not act now, I cannot think we shall have a shadow of liberty left. I believe liberty to be an inherent right, derived by the people from God and nature. Delaware is deadlocked in a 1-to-1 vote. I hope Caesar Rodney can return to us soon and cast a vote for independence.
Mr. President, the chair recognizes the distinguished delegate from the colony of South Carolina, Mr. Arthur Middleton.
Mr. President and fellow delegates, I am Arthur Middleton from the Cotton Colony of South Carolina, where manners are important. Gentlemen, I am usually bored with the body of this routine when I am here, but now it's time to take a stand on the real issue. Independence! I hate the loyalists. How any American would support that fat German sitting on his London throne is beyond me. He and his ministers are incompetent and nincompoops, and they were incapable